Down to Budget 2016, we have a very special guest joining us right now, Mr. Mukesh Butani, Managing Partner at BMR Legal. Mukesh, thank you so much for taking time out to be with us here on ET now in our run-up to Budget 2016. Tell us, my first question to you, is do you expect a clear roadmap for implementing the all-important GST to be a part of this year's budget, and also any hikes expected on the service tax rate?
Well, I think, as we all know, that the implementation of GST is not entirely in the hands of the finance minister, largely because it requires a constitutional amendment, and there has been a logjam insofar as the ability of the current government to seek the requisite majority in the upper house is concerned. So when you say that will there be a roadmap, I think there would be some definitive announcements, but I think whether GST gets implemented in 2017 or it gets stretched beyond that will entirely be dependent on how the upper house and the lower house operates, and the willingness of the opposition to be able to support the constitutional amendment. Having said that, I feel that this year's budget may send out certain signals on a more definitive roadmap, considering the logjam insofar as the constitutional amendment is concerned, and that could come by way of 2-3 indicators. Number one, the rate of CST, whether the CST completely goes away or not, because that's a very important signal, and that's within the realm of the Lok Sabha, and it's a money bill, so there is no challenge on that. The second also is that there are certain credits within the central levies, such as customs, excise, and so on and so forth, where there is no seamless credit mechanism available. So if you go back into the GST draft law as it stands, which is a dual GST level at the state level and at the central level, and you're talking about a seamless credit available in those categories, you may very well see a part GST rollout insofar as seamless credit for central levies is concerned. So I think that also is an indication that can come through the budget. Having said that, I think despite the logjam on the constitutional amendment, there is a whole lot of work that's currently underway to roll out the GST. But I think the larger announcement would still be the constitutional amendment, but you would see some indications in this year's budget, not insofar as timelines for constitutional amendment is concerned, but on seamless credits for all central levies.
Mukesh, we've wrapped up the last entire day of trading before Budget 2016, and given the choppy nature of the markets, do you expect the government to take the plunge and revamp the long-term capital gains tax regime, at least in this budget?
Given the very volatile nature of the capital markets that we are seeing in the last 2 to 3 weeks, largely because of external factors, and not that there is anything wrong that's going with fundamentals of the economy in India. But I think that, so I've also heard news and media talking about rejigging of capital gains, particularly the period of 1 year being extended to 3 years. I think that, well, the government is well within its rights to do whatever it has to do. But I think that it goes, in my view, such moves go against the grain of predictability in tax policy. And, businesses and organizations plan their affairs based on, tax policies as it exists. And these are fundamental shifts in policy. The rate of tax, what period of holding would be considered for the purposes of characterizing a long-term or a short-term gain. I would, even if the markets were not choppy and they were stable, I would not advise a move of this nature, because it goes to the root of predictability and certainty in tax policy, and I think the government should try and avoid any such drastic move, particularly given the timing of the move and the markets being extremely nervous about any tax policy move that's going to impact the investor sentiment, which in the short and medium term will certainly impact the investor sentiment if you start jigging the rates of capital gains tax.
All right, we'll leave capital gains tax for a bit, but Mukesh, apart from the GST, the big question on everybody's mind when it comes to this budget session of the Parliament is the fisc. Tell us, what is your take? Do you think Finance Minister Arun Jaitley will prioritize growth over fiscal discipline in Budget 2016?
Well, as we all know, most economists have opined and suggested that the finance minister sticks to the fiscal deficit target, but there are certain bold economists who believe that he can compromise on the fiscal deficit, provided the leeway that he gets by way of such compromise is utilized for the purposes of public expenditure, insofar as creation of capital assets is concerned. I'm not a trained economist, but I certainly believe in the latter view that we need not be prisoners of fiscal deficit, and even if a compromise is made, there is nothing earth-shattering about it. Having said that, if you also look at the international agencies who are really the ones concerned with India's fiscal deficit, because India's creditworthiness and risk assessment is dependent on what the international credit agencies guide, and that's where issues such as foreign investment and foreign trade assume significance. The international agencies have also opined that a shift in the fiscal deficit or not meeting the fiscal deficit target is not going to impact India's creditworthiness. What is important is the quality of spending. So if the deficit target is missed and the quality of spending suggests that that is going to help grow the economy, that is going to help create jobs, that's going to help push the industrial production, that's going to help the fortunes of manufacturing, then I think it's fine. So you are really looking at a quality growth driven expenditure that is leading to fiscal deficit, and I think personally I feel that that should not be a big problem.
All right, Mukesh, on to something that will affect each and everybody who's watching it, income tax. Mukesh, do you expect any tinkering to the existing income tax laws, maybe to woo the masses?
Well, I think some element of tinkering will happen for lower slabs. So you may very well see that because of the inflation impact, which really hasn't been significant in the last couple of years, that the small taxpayers may get some relief on the rejigging. I don't anticipate any change in the maximum marginal tax rate slab, though there has been debate from certain quarters on a levy of higher rate of personal tax at the maximum slab rate, the super rich tax as you call about. I doubt if there would be such fundamental shifts in the policy that we would see this year. So I would see the income tax rates remaining largely stable. As you know, the levy of additional cess and surcharge is itself high. So though the maximum marginal rate is 30%, with the levy of surcharge and cess, it's almost 35%. In fact, I would expect that if he has to cheer up the sentiments, he would reduce the cess or the surcharge and bring down the effective tax rate at the marginal level from 35% to 33%. But I don't know whether, given the shortfall in direct tax collections this year, which is largely attributable to corporate income tax rate, whether he has the flexibility to do that. So he may well retain the effective maximum marginal rate of 35%, which is 30% plus surcharge and cess, and look at some kind of a reduction only in 17-18 rather than this year. But I don't anticipate any rise in the maximum marginal tax rate.
Mukesh, before we let you go, one last final thing I want to check with you. Do you think that in Budget 2016 there will be a thrust on the startup universe? Do you think the government will offer additional incentives to startups in Budget 2016?
Absolutely. I think that is certainly going to be there in my view, because with so much fanfare, the Prime Minister launched the Startup India project. An integral part of the Startup India project was the 3-year tax holiday. and I think that that is something that would be expected. You will see a necessary amendment in the finance bill, which will, kind of come out with a clear articulation of principle to what categories of startup project this 3-year tax holiday will be applicable.
All right, Mukesh, we will let it go at that. Mukesh Butani, Managing Partner, BMR Legal. Thank you so much for taking time out to be with us as part of this big build-up to Budget 2016. On that note, it's time for a short breather here. But still ahead, India follows the rally in Asian markets after China's central bank chief says yuan will not be weakened further at the G20 summit.